What up, what up, what up? Welcome back. It's another episode of the Dynasty Don. I am joined today by Nate Polvogt at Nate Polvogt on Twitter and Matt Chester at FF Mad Jester. But before we get too deep into it today, we got a lot to cover. Let's drop that intro.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Brodo Fantasy Football Podcast presented by BrodoFantasy.com and the Fantasy Football by Brodo app, the only tool you need to dominate fantasy football.
Like, share, subscribe, download that app. What up, what up? I'm so happy to be back. This is Christmas time for Dynasty, folks. We are post-draft. Rookie drafts are popping off left, right, and center. Lots of them happening as we record. Both me and Matt just went on the clock before we hit record today. I'm so happy to be here with two of my favorite people in the industry, bar none. I've got Nate with me, who is one of the best people in the industry, period. One of the smartest people in the industry, period. Funniest, most lovely, handsome, all of that. He's a writer and podcaster. He does everything under the sun at IBT Media, works at FF Dino Diehards and Razball. He's a member of the Fantasy Sports Writer Association. My guy, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me. I'm just out here footballing, brother. It's what we do, you know.
What you do.
It's what you do.
That's my man. That's my man. And of course, up in the corner here, if you're checking it out on YouTube, which you better, we got my boy Matt Chester at FF Mad Jester. Everybody values everybody differently. It says so on his Twitter bio. He works for Fighting Chance Fantasy Sports and at the Undroppables. You can find Fighting Chance at FC Fantasy Sports on Twitter. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I'm thrilled, man. It's been a wild week. Had a few startups, had a few rookie drafts. It's everything's in movement right now, and it's a whirlwind.
Yeah, and I mean, as art imitates life and life imitates art, and I almost got that sentence out completely, but as life imitates art, obviously the NFL is being twisted and shaken up on its head. So as the dynasty market and all of the ADPs and player values are doing so as well, landing spots certainly affect everything. With that, a little icebreaker question to get us into it. I know that you're a Saints fan, Matt, as am I, but I'll let you have the floor for this. How do you feel overall about the Saints draft? I know we didn't really have a high-end first due to the Olave trade, but got a back-end first. So what were your thoughts overall?
I'll be honest with you. I saw this on the show sheet, and when it said, Nate's favorite team, you cover the Broncos. Matt's favorite team, you cover the Saints. You're Matt, and your favorite team is the Saints. So I was hoping you'd cover that, and I didn't prepare for this one.
My bad. Fair. Yeah, I mean, I like as far as it goes, like I think we can be happy that we had a first at all. Obviously, I would have liked to have seen Nolan Smith. I even tweeted this out. Like, it seems as if we were just, for the past 2 to 3 seasons, have just been an asset farm for the Eagles. But like with the Chauncey Gardner signing, obviously, that's also where Malcolm, help me out with his name. Jenkins, thank you very much. See, you are prepared, man. Also, where Malcolm Jenkins walked and signed with him, had a terrific career, went on their Super Bowl run. Chauncey went there as well. So it seems like we've just been an asset farm. We as the Saints, yes, I say we, get used to it, fans. But and then obviously we trade them Chris Olave. They were able to get Jalen Carter still, and then with the pick, get Jalen Carter. We're able to get Jordan Davis still last year with the pick this year, get Jalen Carter, and then Nolan Smith for reasons unbeknownst to mankind with his size and speed and production that he had at Georgia falls all the way to the Saints, who desperately need edge rushers right now, with Cam Jordan getting a little older and Pete Werner not really turning into the superstar that they were hoping, and obviously Davenport being off his contract. They decide not to make that selection and just allow the Eagles to get Nolan Smith. So we've just set the Eagles defense up with 4 to 5 all-pro assets in the last decade, and that's really rough to see.
So I'll say this. I will defer to Dennis Allen when it comes to defensive guys because he's a defensive coach. and he's been with the Saints for years and years as a defensive coordinator until they pulled him up to head coach last year. So I'll trust his judgment on defense with the Saints, because I have to emotionally.
I have no choice here.
I guess I do know what the Saints drafted, and I'll just say I'm uninspired.
There you go. Yeah, I feel the same way. Now, Nate, Denver native, Broncos fan, I assume.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Good.
Of course, you have to be if you live here.
Okay. So again, no first round pick as it went to the Saints for the rights to sign Sean Payton to a lucrative coaching deal. But overall, I kind of liked Denver's draft. It was strange, but I liked some of the assets. How do you feel about Denver's draft overall?
So I really like it. The Marvin Mims pick was a little interesting, and them not going after a running back, I thought was kind of curious, but they did the things they needed to do. They got help on defense where they needed it. They got some corners. They got a safety. They got Drew Pearson, the linebacker. I'm sure I just said the wrong name. Drew Sanders, whatever. There are Drew Pearsons in this world. The Drew Sanders pick is now we've got somebody to cover Travis Kelce pick in my mind, which is something they had to do to compete in this division. And with Marvin Mims, it just makes you wonder. They must have no faith in Courtland Sutton, which why would you? Wide receiver 44 and wide receiver 43 over the last 2 seasons. I think Mims fits into this offense nicely. I think it's a signal that they're going to move Jerry Jeudy outside with either Courtland Sutton or Tim Patrick, and that we're going to see Mims in the slot because he's a smaller guy. He's not a huge wide receiver, but he works well underneath. And it's something that this Denver offense needs and something Russell Wilson needs. So, I give him an A on this draft. I think with the limited number of picks that they had, and then moving up for Mims, I thought was a little curious when the trade was announced. Like, well, who could they possibly be moving up to get? Like, it better not be something stupid. And it wasn't. And I was ecstatic. Jen will vouch for me. I was very loud about my on this pick. So all in all, man, I think it was a good draft. The Saints, seriously, it was completely uninspiring. But
yeah,
we had what's his name, Dennis Allen in Denver for long enough as a DC, and then he was the head coach, I believe, in Oakland when they were still in Oakland. The Raiders were still in Oakland. Those teams were uninspiring too. So it's what you get with Dennis Allen.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Again, I kind of fall into place that I assume he knows at least what he wants out of these picks, and hopefully that at the very least he's checking those boxes. But again, I think we can all agree that pretty uninspiring from the Saints, and definitely some shocking trades, some shocking moves. I mean, we saw Houston become the first team in NFL history to trade up into the first 3 picks after owning a top 3 pick already of their own. That had never happened before. The only other team in the history of the NFL that ever selected in the top 3 were the Colts in 1992, I believe. So it's only ever happened twice. A pretty incredible scenario there. Lots of shocking picks.
Can we talk about you touched on trades, but let's stick with Denver and New Orleans, because it seems like there's a pipeline, not just the 3 of us, but between New Orleans and Sean Payton and being in Denver, because he picked up he brought Marquez Callaway along with him. He brought Tony Jones along with him. He brought the Saints Alberto Troutman. He brought Adam Troutman. Yeah, he brought Troutman with him. It seems like he's trying to build around what he had a little bit, which is tough if you want to pick out which fantasy weapon you want to use from the Denver offense right now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but I'm definitely going to give a little pushback there, just in the sense of, like, obviously every coach has a certain scheme and a certain system that, this guy does this well on this down, and Adam Troutman being very much a run blocking specialist and arguably a better run blocker than half of Denver's current offensive line. Like, I think there's definitely some nepotism there. Like, there's that can be noted, Matt. Like, you're not wrong in that sense, but I don't think that it's really going to shift anything. Like, any good coach does, they adjust their system to the talent that is around them. Now, I also think there is something to be said about, like, that Mims pick, where Mims to me is very, and this isn't a common comp because of how misused Oklahoma was and how productive this player I'm about to name was in college, but he's very Brandon Cooksy. And I think that that's what Sean Payton saw in Mims. And he's like, I've had that before. I know what I can tell that to do. And that'll work this way in one of my many schemes. Because
if you remember 5 teams ago, Sean Payton drafted Brandon Cooks.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, even as a New Orleans fan, it's hard to remember all the places that he's been through. But that's where Cook started his career. So if you think he has an archetype, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think Sean's definitely doing some of that, maybe some of an older era, because again, he started to transition his system a bit when Drew Brees was getting a little older. You were certainly seeing a lot more checkdowns and that completion percentage skyrocket to all of those record-breaking numbers, and it certainly worked out to Drew's favor. But that's when you can kind of definitely lean towards more, is it the system or the player? I think Sean's smart enough to know what weapons he has in Denver, and again, like the Marquise Callaways, the Adam Troutmans, they might get a little bit of nepotism as far as snap percentages are concerned, but they're not there to take away anything from what he has.
Well, they're not the type of player who's going to. I mean, I love Marquez Callaway, but he's not going to compete with Jerry Jeudy or Marvin Mims. It's just plain and simple. He's not. He's a good receiver, but he's not that level of wide receiver, in my opinion.
If he was, he would have been for them back then.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, there was no
my only problem is that Dulcich and it was Alberto until it was Dulcich, and now there's 3 of them, and that sucks even more. And then it was like, all right, well, it's just Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton because Hamler's injured, and so is
Tim Patrick. And
then even when Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton were both in the field, they both couldn't eat. It just wasn't happening. So now Hamler's back. They're bringing in Callaway also. They've got a third tight end
that's coming in, like replacement level players. Like they genuinely don't matter.
Sure, I completely agree.
Yeah. But players that do matter were like, there's a certain, and I think to like help that transition a little. Those guys don't even have the insulation of draft capital. And why is draft capital so important? It's because it leads to immediate, like, this guy's job is here. We can place him on the depth chart here. And even if that, you can certainly use draft capital to round out analytic profiles. I don't think it should be the end all be all for analytic profiles. I think you should build your profiles and your rankings pre-draft and allow the NFL to tell you what the difference maker is between your tiers. I.e., you can have 4 guys ranked very similarly, and when the NFL drafts them all 4 in a row, you can go, oh, this is how they feel about these guys, these landing spots. I feel this way. This is where I can separate the tiers. But with that said, like, players along those, Marquise Callaway, the undrafted wide receivers, the Raheem Jarrett's of this draft class, the KJ Hamlers, the 2nd to 3rd round speedsters like the Josh Downs and Marvin Mims of this class, those guys are great for real life football schemes, but for fantasy production, the draft capital certainly tells you a little bit of how the NFL feels about these guys. And kind of to go back to that, if he was good enough to take those snaps and those touches, he would have done so already. If that team felt like he was good enough to have them, they would have used that draft capital on him earlier. So I guess that's going to bring me, like, I'm going to ask this to Nate. Why does the NFL draft and where these players land and these subsequent moves and these team choices affect rookie rankings and dynasty markets so drastically? Like, why is that?
For me, it's pretty simple, Matt's, because when you're drafting a player that high, the expectation is they get all the chances. So if you've got a 1st round running back and a 4th round running back, with the 1st round running back, he's going to get the chances because, let's be realistic, this is a business. And they're making more money. And you want that higher paid player to earn that money. Whereas like a guy who goes in the 5th, 6th round, I mean, you're not on the hook for much. You might not even keep them on your roster after camp. Those guys do get shots. We've seen it. We saw a guy like Terrell Davis. He was a 6th round pick. Tom Brady was a 6th round pick. Russell Wilson was a 3rd round quarterback pick. But it takes something happening like Matt Flynn tanking and looking absolutely terrible in camp. Russell Wilson wins the job as a rookie, and the rest is history. Now he sucks for the Broncos. But that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Where these guys go in the draft matters because that tells you how these teams are going to use them. Immediate chance, or something has to happen for this person to get on the field with significant time.
Yeah, absolutely. And to take that a step further, because you did mention some high drafted quarterbacks getting pushed out by lower level drafted quarterbacks, but that is essentially saying like that gives them a leash. And from a dynasty perspective, especially because we had 3 quarterbacks drafted in the top 10, that gives them a leash not only with their team, but a leash within the dynasty market. And it's a very recent example, but you can go back as far as Josh Rosen, as I have brought up on the pod before and done ADP studies of. Like, dynasty value and ADP from year 1 to year 2 for rookie quarterbacks is virtually insulated without effect, regardless of their production. Like, they can only go up. Where they enter, essentially, like we were talking about ADPs a little bit before we got on the mic, and where Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, and CJ Stroud were falling around the 3rd, 4th round. They're not going to be valued below that in next year's draft.
No.
Like, they might lose a slight bit, but even Zach Wilson, who had arguably one of the worst rookie seasons of all time, was a 8th round startup pick or 7th round startup pick when he first entered the league, and was a 7th round startup pick the following season with no real job security or confidence from the franchise, and one of the worst statistical seasons anybody's ever seen. The dynasty market was in a super flex league was still like, you know what, there's a chance. And that's really what and it's that leash of like, he's got the starting job for at least 1 season, probably 2, and that is guaranteed. And these top rated quarterbacks, whether you want to take the upside swing on Anthony Richardson or feel a little safer with the floors of Stroud and Young for their passing prowesses, irregardless, it's the value insulation that they have. And that's what draft capital tells us. If just based on so many historic studies, if they were drafted just in the early first, like Will Levis, or very late in the first, a la Lamar Jackson, luckily that production panned out, but they would not have the same value insulation at all. The dynasty market would be much more willing to move off of them, a la a Jordan Love, who had 1st round draft capital but didn't play, be much more willing to move off of them the following season. So that's 2 of the reasons why I think draft capital is so important. And I'm going to shift this one to Mad Jester here too. The 4th round for running backs. Is that the new 3rd round, which is really the new 2nd round, which is really the new 1st round, because the 2nd round is 1st round for running backs? Like, is the devaluing of the position in the NFL, we're always going to see good prospects get drafted in the 4th and 5th now?
I don't know how to say this without sounding ridiculous, but Houston might have been ahead of the curve sticking with Dameon Pierce.
That's a good take.
But just saying those first few words together, that the H-Town was ahead of the rest of the NFL makes me feel like I'm doing results over process, you know?
Yeah, well, and I mean, but because it's such a small sample size of this transitional period and so to speak, a new era and a new leaf of, we don't care about running backs, or they're always going to be 4th and 5th rounds, or we'd rather have the Isaiah Pacheco and then rotate another Isaiah Pacheco 4 years later instead of ever extending or picking up a 5th year option. Like, because Zeke ruined the market, I don't think that you're crazy. It's weird to give them the credit for it,
it really
because the Bills have been going 0 running back since OJ. But
jeez.
What? I'm just.
I mean, you're not wrong.
OJ, they had to,
but
they didn't really have much of a choice.
It is, but you're not wrong, because Houston did not invest draft capital in another running back, and neither did Tampa Bay, who got Rachaad White very late in the 3rd last season. And obviously Pacheco, the Kansas City Chiefs, did not invest draft capital in a running back, right? So it's very interesting. Like, these teams might not necessarily be ahead of the curve, but buying into something that I think the dynasty market is late on.
So maybe the curve is always spinning around, and they fell off the ride a little bit early. And as the teacup went around another time, the rest of the teams were like, hold on, it worked out for them.
Yeah.
And so they're starting to do that. And I do really like that you put this in tonight's show, because it is really interesting to me how much these running backs are falling in rookie drafts. We've been talking about the running back class of this year for 2 years now.
3,
and now
really.
There are so many.
Like, Tank and Bijan both broke out as true freshmen. Gibbs was a Paul Hornung finalist as a true freshman. So, like, yeah.
I mean, it's been a long time, and I'm sure when Roshan A year before that was a huge breakout too, and he just got covered up by Bijan, which is, it happens. But I think that what I'm finding in rookie drafts that are happening since the NFL draft is that we all, as a dynasty community, have been saying 0 RB, 0 RB, 0 RB. When is the NFL going to learn that, that you get more production by paying the line a bunch of money and having a better line protect for some jag who's, just doing what he's supposed to do. And that's fine. And so we've been moving towards 0 RB slightly ahead of the NFL. And we've just been patting ourselves on the back and saying, look how smart we are. When is the NFL going to learn? When is the NFL going to learn? Blah, 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 blah. And I think that maybe the NFL learned this year, and instead of saying, hey, they did it, we can adjust our ranks according to what the NFL feels about these players by shifting RBs down to where they think that they should be. Instead, we're looking at all these RBs as failures because they're getting such low draft capital.
Yep.
And now I'm finding that all the 109 to 205s that I was saving up to get, I just wanted to get like 4 of these RB 5 through 10s. I wanted to get like 4 of them early second. Now we're getting all these third round wide receivers who never work out, jumping them in rookie draft order, and we're able to get all the Tank Bigsby's at 206, and it's great. So I guess the NFL caught up to us, and instead of saying, hey, we did it, we went hand in hand with them, we just kind of like turned around and said, oh no, what happened? And the NFL is like crossing the finish line while the hares slept and the tortoises are like showing us to, move back to the second round and get 2 of those guys. They're not worthless just because the NFL caught up.
I think you make a bunch of really great points, and I'm going to pop it off to Nate to hear his thoughts on this as well in a second. But I think I mentioned a little bit earlier on that I think everybody invested so much into this class because there was so much running back depth. Mm-hmm. And then the NFL saw that and goes, well, let's just play, take the last of the tier, as we also do in drafts. So let's let these guys slide to the end of the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th.
The running backs didn't get worse.
Right. So it's and if that continues for forever and always, if they just continue to do this with running backs because of, cost of contract and level of replacement, then
so there's another factor that I wanted. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll jump back in.
No, when I was just going to say that, then it comes down to basically like, how do you value the running back overall? If it continues, and then we can change our hit rate models to say, look, 4th round is the new 3rd, which was always the 2nd, because 2nd round is 1st round for running, right? Like, it really does go like that. You very rarely see only generational running backs, and then the Detroit Lions getting crazy on Gibbs go in the 1st round. So Nate, it's like the one thing that I want to ask you before we kind of switch topics to the next draft piece is like, is the running back position dead?
Dude, it feels like it's getting there, doesn't it? Because now you've got Bijan, obviously, perfect landing spot in Atlanta, in my opinion. He's the only running back that should have gone in the 1st round. Jahmyr Gibbs going that early to the Lions, like, what's happening? You had DeAndre Swift, who is just Jahmyr Gibbs, but a couple of years older. We don't know that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be more durable than DeAndre Swift. And he's essentially the same runner. He's not a guy who can pound at the line. He's not a guy who's good between the tackles. He's a flighty, pass-catching running back. But even his value to me, he's going too early in rookie drafts because he's got David Montgomery, who is a very similar runner with just a little bit more power between the tackles than Jahmyr Gibbs has. Then you've got Seattle taking Zach Charbonnet, and he's like, what the hell is happening? Well, I'll tell you what's happening. Maybe we're a little too high on Ken Walker. Maybe he had a really good rookie season. Sure. Can he replicate that? I don't think Pete Carroll and the Seahawks think so, because they brought in Zach Charbonnet. You had guys like Kendre Miller slipping back, which I totally understood because he's kind of that old school type runner, like an Emmitt Smith runner that doesn't work in the NFL anymore. That's not what the league is. They're looking for these shifty, quick guys, and it's hard to find value in these guys now. We're getting to a point, the Derrick Henrys of the league, when he's gone, there will never be another Derrick Henry. That's just like big, powerful runner who can just blow through people, but has no pass catching acumen whatsoever. the positions changed. And like you were saying, Matt, like fantasy kind of got ahead of it a little bit, but now that the NFL's caught up, dynasty managers are regressing.
Like we're double counting. We're double counting them catching up. We're double counting the draft capital.
Mm-hmm. Right. Which is never, it's simply not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
So another factor about them taking draft capital into account with running backs being replaceable is that the wide receiver market is getting so much more expensive that if you want to do really good things, and it's getting more expensive for a few reasons, but one of them is that the NFL is just becoming more pass happy. And as it becomes more pass happy, they're going to want more 3 wide receiver sets. So wide receivers are going to be more, they need, the equilibrium needs to get back into stasis, and they need to have more wide receivers in the league to soak up all those targets. Right. And and the fact that they're expensive means that the best way for NFL teams to do that right now is to go through them, is to just get them on their rookie contract and work around the fact that they know that those guys are going to be expensive later. Whereas the running backs are not going to be expensive later. They're going to be very fungible, very replaceable. So they're trying to settle a new formula into everything with money and draft capital. And it's just, we all knew that it was going to happen, and then it did. And now we're getting all the cheaper running backs, Charbonnet's in the second now. That's silly.
Yeah. And I mean, I do still think it's a very small sample size to be able to change that analytic model, but that's there's always going to be the analytic pushback because of how much historic data you have to look at, so that when changes do actually happen, it takes those changes becoming historic data before, they really kind of change the model. But with that said, I think that kind of goes into smaller wide receivers as well. And you saw it. Obviously, Addison was the one this year in the first round, but for ever and ever, you never saw wide receivers like below 6 foot and 180 pounds drafted in the first. They could have, kind of outlier breakouts, so to speak, a la T.Y. Hilton and Brandon Cooks, but you just didn't see them get that first round draft capital, right? So with that said, one, are we a little disappointed about this wide receiver class? Whereas, we were hoping for maybe some top 10 super elite profiles when you round out with top 10 draft capital. And is there a new norm where guys like Addison, Zay Flowers are going to continue? Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Markey are going to continuously get first-round draft capital. The new wide receiver mold in the NFL isn't 6'3", 220. It is seemingly, you look at all of these guys being uber productive, and yes, you can argue that for everyone there is an A.J. Brown, there is a Jamar Chase, there is a true alpha, but you're also talking about 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns on 91 catches. I don't care what they measure in at.
Well, I think this goes into how the league has changed in general. They're prioritizing safety, right? So corners and safeties can't play as tough on these guys. They can't hit them the same way that they used to. So you don't need a Calvin Johnson. Most offenses don't want a Calvin Johnson type player. They want the short, small guys that can move through traffic. I mean, I know that sounds weird, but if you kind of look at how it's progressing, and more safety, keep these guys safer. We don't want the big hits. When you don't have the big hits, you don't need that big dude all the time. That's what your tight ends are for now. You use your tight ends in the end zone, in the red zone, for those jump balls. You don't need that big receiver. You do get the guys who can do it. You get the Jamar Chases and the A.J. Browns who are bigger guys, but that's becoming more and more a rarity if you look across the league.
Yeah, and I think I'll toss this one to Matt too, because I think he made a great point previously in the fact that these guys are also getting first-round draft capital, because the more that it becomes a passing league, the more wide receivers that are needed in general. And that you can't allow these guys to slide because it's a copycat league. All 31 other teams are thinking the same thing as you are. I need 3 of these guys to be able to compete in this league. Right. So with that, Matt, are you disappointed at all with the 4 wide receivers that did see first round draft capital and the ones that kind of slipped back, where Jalen Hyatt didn't get any good draft capital? And he was obviously a Biletnikoff winner, had a very phenomenal junior breakout, that Josh Downs, a 40% target earner and 40% market share earner, phenomenal analytical profile, didn't get draft capital, but guys like Jaden Reed did.
I'm not disappointed in this, in how this wide receiver class ended up after the draft, because I wasn't expecting this much attention to happen to the wide receiver draft. I'm actually really thankful for this wide receiver draft, because a lot of these second and third round wide receivers are going to jump a lot of these running backs that would have been, we were arguing, well, who's going to go at the end of the first, and we would name like 6 running backs last year, and now we're like, oh well, Josh Downs is. There's all these like third round guys who might be something. And if we've been looking at this class the right way since before draft capital over the last few years, this might be a good time to stick to your priors, because part of the narrative about running backs this year was that the 2017 class and 2018 class was going to start aging out. We're seeing it with Zeke. We're seeing it with everybody's. Aaron Jones is 28 years old. Kamara, we don't know about him.
Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon,
all these other guys.
They were all in the same draft class.
And now we're forgetting about that again. So we're forgetting about them getting older. We're forgetting about, we're like, these guys, like they have all these running backs got terrible spots. Yeah, because these old running backs who were studs are still in the league for another year or two. But if this is a historically stronger, deeper running back class, this might be a good time to just stock up on a couple of those guys and be as patient as we had been knowing that we wanted to be over the last 2 years when we were gaining all these 23 picks.
Yeah, I think that's really sound advice. I think that's absolutely excellent. And I mean, with that in mind, there's obviously, I think the most obvious is Bijan to the Falcons. Like, Arthur Smith is going to run the football. He hates Kyle Pitts. He doesn't care that he has a unicorn in him and Drake London. He goes, don't care about your target share. Desmond Ridder, who I'm also going to let get 15 rushes a game, and the best generational running back that we've seen since Saquon Barkley, arguably. Let's get those guys on the same offense together, and then I'm just going to build offensive line throughout the draft. Like, he's not going to pass the football. He's not going to pass the football. I think this actually might be a discount on Kyle Pitts that is finally warranted, that I'm actually not going to buy the dip on.
I'm not touching it.
Yeah.
I've been burned 2 years in a row. Dude, this is I know we all got so mad, like, throw the ball to Kyle Pitts because he's such a talented tight end. But dude, this is one of those situations where landing spot matters. And it mattered really hard for Kyle Pitts. Can Desmond Ridder support Drake London being a top tier fantasy receiver? I mean, he could be a wide receiver 1 to like a high-end wide receiver 2, but I mean, really, that's his ceiling. This isn't a guy who's going to sneak into the top 5 in this offense, because They got Bijan Robinson, and the dude is going to 400 touches, 450 touches his rookie season.
I mean, probably more.
Because he can catch too. He can catch the ball.
As a rookie is legit.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, like I and people are going to be like, nobody, and it's like, no, like, that's probably completely okay. You're talking about 300 rush attempts and 100 targets.
Do y'all know
opportunities, I should say, whether he turns all of those targets and I mean, sure. I genuinely think he's going to get that.
Do y'all remember who flipped the switch on Derrick Henry's usage after DeMarco Murray left?
Arthur Smith did.
Bijan Robinson's coach.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that I do think that is the best landing spot for anyone in this draft class as far as prospect strength goes, and also arguably the worst landing spot for the people that are already on that team, just because it solidified what we were already like told throughout 2 entire seasons with Arthur Smith as the head coach, and just kept being like, nah, we're fantasy analysts. We know better. You have Kyle Pitts. Like, so and he's just going, don't care. You want to know why? Because Parker Hesse can block. Like,
I'd like to click back a little bit on this. You're describing AJ Brown 2 years ago to me,
100%,
which is fine. So, Matt, we have to
guess who his coach was.
We have to set exactly. We have to set our biases aside as Saints fans talking about this Falcons team, and we have to love our enemy for what they are. They are not going to give us points unless you want to dip back in later and talk about Ridder, which might be the most fun arbitrage Konami guy that there is, because he's got all these weapons. And it's okay that you want to fade more than consensus right now, both y'all, Pitts and London. That's totally understandable. I don't really want Pitts on teams that I'm competing in. I don't want Pitts in lineups that I'm competing with, but I'm still infatuated with the guy.
Me too.
You know, he's still an AJ Brown that we're tearing our hair out over for 2 years, saying, why won't anybody get him? And now he's top 6 wide receiver, and he is doing his thing. And you can't discount who they will be in Dynasty. You can only discount what you can do with them for the time being. So I'm not off of them as a blanket. I'm off of them in certain situations, and I'm very much on them in other situations.
I think that makes absolute sense. I think there were a lot of affected landing spots for sure. And I mean, let's get into some of them. We got obviously Falcons for Bijan, which we covered. Seahawks get JSN. The Lions get Gibbs at 12, which, I mean, if you're an analytic guy, the analytic guys are going to, and I am one. And this, again, I kind of agree with Nate, might be a little too high for Gibbs, but like that profile with top 15 draft capital, you should probably take after the first QB off the board. But that said, you get Vikings with Addison, Chargers, Quentin Johnson, Ravens, Flowers, Bills get Kincaid in the first, trade up ahead of the Cowboys to do so. And we mentioned a few times, obviously, the Seahawks maybe having not as much confidence in Kenny Walker as the Dynasty community does, drafting a bigger back with a very similar skill set, limited passing production, but more production than Kenny Walker had in passing by far. I mean, in one season, Zach Charbonnet had more passing production than Kenny Walker had in 3 years.
Was that a college scheme situation, or was that
potentially? Yeah, but also we have to remember that KW didn't actually get any touches that were meaningful until he transferred to Michigan State. So that is potentially some scheme, but it's not like he only caught 16 passes in that final year.
Is Kenneth Walker the Dameon Pierce that we were all scared of?
No, I think K-Dub is actually like legit. I just think this is saying that committees are going to become normal. Like it's going to be commonplace. And because, again, I'll round that out by saying Charbonnet is arguably the best pure pass blocker of any running back in this class. Like what he actually does that NFL teams go, that is worth a second round pick, or that is worth an early third, is you can put him out there on third downs and teams are like, oh, fuck. Like
another lineman that they can throw
exactly
to.
It's another lineman that can also gain 4 yards, that can also run a swing route, right? So it's exactly with that, like I think my favorite landing spot, other than the obvious one of RB1 overall, I loved Addison to the Vikings. People were down on it. I thought it was the best landing spot of all 4 of those wide receivers that went back to back to back to back to back.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, though. I like Zay Flowers to Baltimore a little bit more.
Really?
Wow.
I want Nate Popoff.
Okay, so everyone says, dude, what are you doing? This is a run-heavy offense. It's not a run-heavy offense anymore. This is Todd Monken's offense. This is the air raid offense. They are going to be throwing the ball like mad, which is all Lamar has wanted. So now you've given him Zay Flowers. He's got Rashad Bateman. We haven't seen Rashad Bateman pop, right?
Right.
Hasn't been on the field enough to really pop. And then they got him OBJ. Like, who cares about that? The guy's washed. He's way past his prime. 2 torn ACLs. Maybe he doesn't even have an ACL, depending on who you believe. And then you're going to give him Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers. This dude is an elite wide receiver and will be an elite wide receiver. And he's going to see elite volume in an offense. It's going to – because, look, they didn't upgrade at running back. They've got J.K. Dobbins, but he wasn't especially explosive until the end of last season. And we don't know what he's going to look like coming into 2023 if he can even stay healthy. He's had injury issues.
That knee is not good.
See, and that's the thing that people are like, well, no, it was just one injury. It was an ACL tear. But it was a really bad ACL tear that took him –
and a meniscus
that took him a while to get back from. And players aren't always the same after those kinds of injuries, especially when they rely on that explosiveness. And then they tend to favor that knee, which causes other injuries. It causes ankle injuries. It causes hip injuries. It causes opposite knee injuries. So you start running into this cycle of injuries. I don't think this is a team that's going to be running the ball a ton. I think they're going to let Lamar Jackson do his thing. And, dude, people are like, well, he can't throw. He had some issues the last couple of seasons. But, dude, he won MVP, and he had, 40 touchdowns that season?
38.
38 touchdowns.
Hyper accurate.
hyper accurate.
Yeah, 4,200 yards. Can't
dude's
pass.
a phenomenal passer.
Yeah, sure.
And now his offensive coordinator just won 2 national championships with a dude named Stetson Bennett at quarterback. What do you think he's going to do? Dropping dimes. Now he's got Lamar Jackson, who is far above the passer that Stetson Bennett is. You think he's not going to be good? You think he's not going to run a tight offense that's going to compete for this division and maybe for the AFC when all is said and done? Like, get off of this whole run heavy scheme. Okay. They changed offensive coordinators for a reason. Roman's offense wasn't working anymore. And this isn't Monken's first time in the NFL.
True.
He has shown that he can be a really good offensive coordinator at the NFL level. So
just had to go win 2 natties.
Right. He wanted 2 natties for fun, and now he's back in the NFL in a situation with a phenomenal quarterback, and they got him Zay Flowers. Like, I just think this is my favorite wide receiver landing spot. I've talked myself into it even more now.
Yeah, you're starting to talk me into it too, because I did once write, and I pulled up the quote that I think Zay Flowers might be the most pro-ready receiver in this NFL draft. His years and experience in college should allow him to develop much quicker than his peers. And that's also another reason, although they do have Lamar on the extension officially, and it was like the franchise tag was waived before the draft happened, I also think they are very much in a win now mode. Like, they're not looking to develop a receiver. They want one that's going to walk into that offense and produce. You throw him 90 balls, he's going to catch 75 for 900. Like, that's the guy that they want to just walk in and do that. And I absolutely
because
think
of the
Zay Flowers
cost of wide receivers, there's no more developing wide receivers in the NFL.
Right.
I think they have to be ready if they want to help the team, because they're probably going to move around and be just completely tertiary pieces by the end of the rookie contract.
I think you make a really good point there. And that's kind of like a tertiary point, to use that word twice, that it always used to be assumed that, like, the wide receiver breakout, you got like year 2, year 3 is when you're going to see the wide receiver breakout. And rookie running backs, like, if they don't show you anything in year 1, there goes their value for year 2, right? Speaking of a dynasty market, obviously guys get certain leashes within their teams, have a little later breakouts, a la Devontae Adams. Guys do take longer and snuff them under depth charts just for historic, like, age reasons. Teams are old school, whatever. Beyond the point. But with that said, I think Matt makes an excellent point, is absolutely right. And you've seen it many a times over the last, let's say, even 6 to 7 years. Like, you have to be good right away as a wide receiver in the NFL. There is no grace period anymore because of all of the things we've alluded to during this episode. It's a copycat league. It's a pass happy league. It is getting to be a smaller, quicker league that is less focused on high impact and high contact situations, which creates higher scoring naturally, which is what the NFL as a business wants. It's what every sports league wants as a business.
We're going from a clunkier machine to a machine with more faster moving parts.
Right, exactly.
It's more efficient.
Exactly. So I think the Ravens went out and got the guy that they felt like it's not going to take 1, 2, 3 weeks even, like, for him to learn this scheme. Like, Zay Flowers is a guy that functioned at a very, very high level, at a very impressive level, specifically in a senior year, on a horrendous offense, and arguably had the best draft process of any prospect, regardless of position. All you ever heard about when you looked up draft prospect news was Zay Flowers dominating another interview, Kansas City using a top 30 visit on him when he was already in Texas for a visit, when they were going to say they would use top 12 on him, and then Kansas City saying, no, you know what, we'll send Patrick Mahomes down there, don't go anywhere. Like, so Zay
Flowers gained 10 or 12 pounds for the combine too, right? Was that him?
Yes.
Or was that Downs?
Yeah, and still ran a 4.4. Like,
there's some dog.
Yeah,
he's got some dog in him.
Everything right. Certainly deserve this draft capital. So I think we can round that out by saying no. The market might be acting on it a little bit, but this wide receiver class is by no means disappointing when you're looking at those 4 first-round wide receivers.
Nate, you turned me on to Zay Flowers, and I was going to be so excited to watch him go in every draft without me having it's basically every time I watch him go, I'm watching somebody who I want get closer to me. I've already got FOMO, and I'm only like an eighth of the way through my rookie drafts, man.
Dude, I just took him at 111 today in a draft.
Wow, that's great.
That's
man.
Great value. Yeah.
Who else you gonna take?
If you're in a league with me, please don't listen to my content until after the rookie drafts.
Dude.
And I mean, I'll do that quick rundown too, just because we mentioned Zay Flowers 111. I think that's phenomenal value. Your rookie drafts are going to play out pretty obviously, in my opinion. Not much changed after the draft, except analytics getting very enamored with Jahmyr Gibbs. You're going to see him go as high as 1.3, 1.4. That's going to happen for sure. But it's Bijan. It's the 3 quarterbacks. it's Gibbs and JSN, and then Addison, Johnson, Flowers, however you want to mix those three up. After that, you're probably going to see Kincaid, and then that's where things get interesting. If people do start reaching on Levis or Josh Downs or those later, the Jalen Hyatts who only had third round, or some of the Marvin Mims or, Jaden Reed who got pushed up into higher rounds. If guys start reaching on those and you can get those Zay Flowers, like, this is where it kind of, as we've said a few times, like, we shot ourselves in the foot with this class. We knew what should happen, and then when it happened, we're like, oh no. So yeah, I think that back end, after that 1-9, basically, you're going to see a lot of people try to move out and take big discounts to do so. There might be a little bit of an avenue where you can kind of get your guy in what is always supposed to be a fun thing to play, which is fantasy football, and pay basically the same risk cost, which is, if somebody wants to go throw me a fourth so I can move back from 110 to 2-2 or 2-4, and that Zay Flowers happens to fall to 110, I mean, let's go, Poppy.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's asking for that little to move up 8 spots in the
110 to 2-2. That's 4 spots.
1-4 to 2-4 to 110. Look, all I'm saying is that I'm happy to move back from 110, but I need to be getting like 2 seconds. It doesn't matter too much where they are, but you won't want to be like 204, 210's probably fine.
I know that people are taking discounts just because that consensus is going to be driven so strong that tier is the same anyway. The 110 to 2-2 to 2-4, sure, if you want it, whatever. But 2-2, those last 4 picks, 110, 111, 112, 2-1, 2-2. It's going to be driven so hard that that's a tier that it'll be like, just take anything on top of it. You're getting the same risk investment. You're getting the same hit rate. Take a third, take a fourth. And people will sell that as sound advice.
My cliff was 108.
I think it's
Nate
more
just messed it all up, man. Nate,
I do still
sorry.
I mean, they have first round
shake
draft
things
capital,
up, man.
But Nate makes such a great point. That's basically like, a team is telling you that they're trying to change their offensive scheme. He has
the Monken point was fantastic, dude. I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about the coaching change. That is a really big deal in that offense. You're right.
And it's everything that we've said too. Like, again, you're kind of doing it to yourself, even though you gave yourself your own advice. Like, these guys got first round draft capital. This is the NFL telling you, like, these receivers are better than you thought.
Yep, very much.
You know what I mean? So they are, when you're getting to that, nobody's after 1-8, it's trash. Like, after Addison, or, because obviously he's the Bolitnikov with the 1,500-yard season and 45 touchdowns, but I exaggerated slightly for the listeners.
Just a little.
Yeah. But it's like, after that, it's like, it's trash. Like, the QJ is such a risk. It's such a risk with Flowers. Kincaid, you don't want to spend a first on rookie tight ends. When it's like, man, this is the NFL telling you, we're moving in this direction. These are all of the check marks that you want to see in a prospect profile and analytic profile from a fantasy perspective. We are the billion-dollar business of missing that is telling you this is what we're going to do with these players. And we're still being like, bad class. Like, I think it's kind of crazy. I'm fine taking that. This is Flowers, the Johnsons at 110 and fine with it.
Dip. Like we always say, buy the dip. The dip that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
You're right. Yep.
And I do think there is a tier. Like, we've talked about that tier, and obviously there's succinct tiers. I don't think that it's ignorant, or I do think it is ignorant to ignore that tier, but to say that it's like, just move these picks for any gain, or like these, like take an extra second on top of 110 to move down, 5-8 picks, is like, that's a bigger tier. A lot of the times, especially if people are getting a little wiser with what Matt said, where, you kept a lot of those early seconds to go on that running back run, because that, the hit rates might be a little less as far as the model tells you, but the more of them that you have, the better chance that you have to flip a Dameon Pierce for a 2023 first, which a lot of people were doing at one point in time. And again, in hindsight, does it look like that bad of a move? I mean, potentially not. Well, time will tell. I do think that there's a lot of positive landing spots on the back end of this as well. Like, I really liked Marvin Mims. We talked about that at the top of the pod. I liked Marvin Mims. I thought that was a positive landing spot in Denver. I thought Darnell Washington had absolutely horrendous landing spot in Pittsburgh. He's not going to outplay any sort of receiving role of Pat Freiermuth.
He's a blocker.
Pat Freiermuth is such a good route runner. He's such a good pure receiver. And sure, Darnell's going to take all the run blocking snaps, but I mean, that was a horrendous landing spot for me. I don't like that the Packers went double tight end because now I don't know which one to draft. So that was a little confusing.
So if you want to talk about cost,
my notes.
It's okay to talk about what Belichick has been doing. He's been trying to go back to a double tight end focused offense, because go with the cheapest players and be ahead of the curve. And once you start getting the cheapest players and you can fill in the rest with cheap rookies, if they're spreading it out and now all of a sudden 3 smaller, faster wide receivers are basically doing what one small, fast wide receiver and one big wide receiver was doing in the last generation, which we'll call like every 8 years or something, we might, because there's getting to be an extra small, fast person basically per team, they should be getting another big person to balance that out. And that's going to be a cheap tight end. So it makes sense that there's going to be more of a dispersion of responsibility and amongst running backs as well. If it's going to be committee by running backs, if it's going to be 3 wide receiver sets, and it's going to be a lot of 12 personnel with two tight ends, because they're replacing their wide receiver responsibilities of big guys in the end zone more with
the get away with the tight ends.
So there's just, as things are changing, it's just a really good time of a really good year to be ahead of it with all these tight ends coming out and just scooping up a bunch of late ones. So like you don't know which Green Bay tight end to get, right? You almost just want to say, hey, get the cheaper one. Like the way Baltimore themselves, they took Hayden Hurst and then they took Mark Andrews a few years later. Now, if you're smart or a tight end guy, like our boy Coupe Fiasco, he took Hayden Hurst, because he was a first round pick, he would just taxi Mark Andrews. So I guess the answer is just always, because it's spreading all of his responsibility, just take 2 of the late ones. That's basically going to be my answer to every question you have. Is just like, do you want this? Do you want this? Like, give me 2 of the late ones, because it's not going to be much.
I think that's good advice, especially with the tight ends, because again, like, it's common knowledge now, but how late you see their supposed career breakouts. And I'll give a great one too to piggyback on your exact mentality. There is Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. Right? It was they didn't care that they had a 4-time All-Pro tight end. Yep. They drafted the best player available, and it happened to be another tight end that happened to work out very, very well for them. And again, it's kind of that cost above replacement where you get him cheap. Now you don't have to extend Ertz for the money that the Cardinals had to pay him and things of that nature. So yeah, obviously, I don't think it's necessarily a bad practice. And I do think that there could be a little bit more of a changing of the guard in that sense, where that is kind of how you see teams build out, especially if you're going to see more success with teams having that superstar tight end in general. Now, obviously, Travis Kelce is a unicorn, but you look at, the Buffalo Bills went and spent first-round draft capital on somebody that they think can be Travis Kelce. And you've seen Kansas City obviously run the tables on teams, and how New England was doing it for years and years and years. It is a formula that seemingly works very well.
What
having
is
that big tight end that can catch, and then supplementing the other tight end work with that traditional blocker.
Oh, you're talking. So we're back on Darnell Washington now.
I mean, we always were, I guess, in all honesty. But it works, but it's just a terrible landing spot, because any upside specifically that you wanted for Darnell, we knew there was a very slim window for his pass catching upside.
For sure.
Yeah, he had the athleticism, check. Best run blocker of anybody in any position, check. Like, we knew he was going to get NFL draft capital simply because of the run blocking, and he still got pretty decent draft capital for a tight end.
And he did
behind a guy where he'll have no pass catching, that just ruins him.
And
there is no avenue for routes.
Brings another specific nuance to how this draft fell, is because these guys that we were thinking like, oh my God, he could have a chance, he would be awesome, and then he falls behind a guy who's I remember seeing a tweet like 6 months ago, and it was like, oh, what are those spots that you don't want to see running backs fall to? And everybody was naming the same 12 spots. And what it comes down to is just, it's the 12 spots that the top 12 dynasty running backs were in. And you're like, that's not a formula, guys. You're just talking about the teams who already have the archetype that you want. But the archetype is changing. So, it's, all these guys that, like, I was probably going to do a early second on Izzy Abanikanda. I was probably going to do, a lot of people were going to do early seconds on Darnell Washington. A lot of people were going to do early seconds on, a lot of people were going to do late firsts on Charbonnet, but he went to where Ken Walker's there. And like, all these guys are landing behind guys, but if all of them are landing behind guys, like, it's okay to kind of still lean into Izzy shouldn't be going in at like 3-5. He's going to be right behind Brees, who's coming off of an injury, and there's nobody else there. I mean, Michael Carter's fine, but there's just there's a lot of opportunity hidden behind these top guys, and Darnell Washington fell in under it, and
I don't think
wanting to stay.
I genuinely think like Darnell is dead. We
I
needed
do
him
too.
to go to
I
like
do
the
too.
Titans, where there were or the Panthers, where there was like Hayden Hurst or somebody in front of him, where they would actually be like, hey buddy, run a few routes here. Pat Freiermuth is a top 5 dynasty tight end. Like, they're not going to go take the routes away from this guy that has caught 17 touchdowns over 2 seasons.
Yeah.
No, right. Like, they're just not going to do that.
Whereas Darnell Washington over his college career caught
such a specialist.
He caught 3 out of his, while he was on the field, over 100 touchdown passes were thrown, and he got 3 of them.
Yeah.
That's Darnell Washington, as big as he is, as like fast as he is, as ready as he is.
So we just needed an NFL team to tell us, like, look, we're going to let this guy run routes. And the Steelers told us, we got a new fullback.
It's not
That's kind of, that. And so the reason that I was bringing Darnell up and kind of stamping my flag on that is he would have been probably my Vontae Mack of that second round of like, I want to leave every draft with this player after people take Kincaid, after people take Meyer and Laporta. Like, I'm okay spending a late second, whatever, on Darnell. Still, I guess we'll do it probably a few times, but not necessarily okay with it anymore. He was my guy that I was like, I really do want to leave drafts with this guy. In the first round, I would say now, like, I don't want to leave a draft without one of JSN or Addison. I really, really want one of those wide receivers. I think they will career arc as the best wide receivers in this class. So now, with that said, our last like flag plant of the episode, start with Nate, the one rookie that you can't leave this class without. And if you don't have that, then tell me who you think the best rookie of the class is going to be, sans Bijan.
Well, I think I already kind of alluded to this. If I don't have a top 5 pick, it's Zay Flowers.
Yeah.
Or if I miss on Flowers, Dalton Kincaid, because I think he's going to be huge in Buffalo. He's that big reliable pass catching tight end that they've needed. And they kind of had in Dawson Knox, but Dawson Knox, it's so touchdown dependent. I think we're going to see the volume from Kincaid to where, I mean, he's a top 5 tight end moving forward in Dynasty. I don't think that's out of the question for him. I think landing spot dictates he very well could be. So, I mean, for me, it's Kincaid and Flowers. I already stated my case on Flowers. We don't need to hear that again.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Matty boy, your Vontae Mack, who's your sticky note? Like, you're not leaving your draft without this guy. You'll move mountains to get him, but like where your picks land, you'll put him ahead of at the top of that tier, so to speak.
So I'm glad you ended the question like that, because I hate being at the tops of tiers, and that's the problem. That's why I can't plant a flag on anybody, because I'm so value based. Bruce Lee, be like water. I don't want to pick at 102. I want to pick at 104. I don't want to make a decision as to who I want from Gibbs or JSN. I want that decision to be made for me. So just be like water. With jiu-jitsu, you use your enemies' energy against them, and you let them do what they want. I don't want a flag plant in this class. I can talk about people whose values I think are getting completely overlooked. I think that I just took, and Nate, I'm a little upset with you about making me regret it right now at 109. I took Sharbs instead of instead of Flowers, instead of the fourth wide receiver that would have been off the board, because
I will say this with that
and
decision.
then Quentin, it was JSN and then Quentin and Addison, and then it would have been Flowers, except I think as much as we discounted the entire running back class, we way overdid it with that. And not only that, but I don't know how Charbonnet got dragged into there. He was always gonna. He was to most people. So for me, I think pass protection is so important in today's NFL. I think it's what sets running backs apart and gets them on the field in times that there are the most points to be gained through PPR fantasy. So if you want to get on the field in third down, be a guy that Pete Carroll trusts. Just be a guy that you can be a 32-year-old McKinnon and you're worth more than CEH because the pass protection is there. So if you have an all-around bell cow back, and who took him and where, you got an old head like Pete Carroll who wants an old school back who he can depend on, and he took him where old head running backs would be taken by old head coaches like Pete Carroll. And in that running back room, now there's two studs who both got taken, I think, second round. Ken Walker might have been second round. Okay.
Second round.
So he's got two stud running backs, and then you've got a bunch of guys that are climbing up. So in the drafts that I've done so far, I've watched Devin Achane and Kendre Miller both go above him. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a third one, but there's these guys creeping up because people are like, oh, well, Achane's super, super fast. Let's forget about his 188 weight, 180 pounds, because he went to a Shanahan disciple. Woohoo! He's super fast. He could be awesome in there. But you know what Shanahan disciples do? They have three-headed running back rooms, and they're splitting between a guy that Mike McDaniel brought with him from 49ers, Jeff Wilson, and another guy that he did the same thing with in Raheem Mostert. So I don't know why we're assigning this 188-pound guy bell cow duties in a traditionally three running down system. And not just that, but then we get a Kendre Miller. And you know it's hard for me, Matt. I want to make a Kendre Miller luxury pick because he's a Saint now. And it's more fun when you get to pull for the people that you want to pull for and blah, 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 blah. He's a plotter. He's never been a pass catcher, and he's splitting the room with not just – we don't know what's going to happen with Kamara. People are counting him out for dead, but he might play 10 games this year, and we don't know what Dennis Allen's doing. And it's not a super explosive offense. And then we also just got Jamal Williams. So, like, why would I take Kendre Miller at 111 when I can arbitrage to, why would I take either Achane or Kendre Miller if I can arbitrage? You know what I did yesterday? I sold my Achane. I sold my pick at 111. That the guy ended up taking Achane. And in return, I got Derrick Henry and 2/3. And with the 2/3, I went out and bought Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. So now I got Derrick Henry. Good move. Yeah, now I got Derrick Henry and 2/3 of a Shanahan running back room. And some dude's like, my 188-pound dude is going to be like, he's going to be good for years. And that's the arbitrage to do. I think that I don't know how we forgot that the guy that we always liked the most went around ahead of these guys that are jumping into more cluttered backfields. So I guess I'll say Charbonnet if you make me.
Yeah, it took you 6 minutes, but yeah. All right. Well, with that, I mean, I think that's going to wrap it up. We got our flag plants. We got our hot takes. We went through the rookie landing spots. We covered it all. I mean, thanks for joining in, everybody. Nate, where can they find you? Tell them what you're working on.
Well, I've got some irons in the fire right now. Primarily, you can find me in Between Media. I put 4 to 6 articles out a month for Fantasy Pros, but you can find all my work at Nate Polvogt on Twitter and wait for some updates coming soon, hopefully.
Right on. I'm excited about those updates. I'm always onto your content, man. One of the best in the industry. No lies, no jokes.
Appreciate that, man.
Matt, tell them where they can find you. What are you working on?
Hey, buddy. So I just got picked up by The Undroppable at The Undroppables. It's on Twitter. They got a great website. It's just a really fun crew. We do a lot of roundtables and streaming and podcasts, and check out the website. And just follow along through the draft season, because there's so much going on below the surface that you can't just take these blurbs about player profiles. You really got to get your both hands into the ground meat and get into it.
Yeah, and one of those places that you can get both your hands in is at Brodo Fantasy, of course. Please consider downloading the app. It's absolutely free. It has all of the stats and news and everything we've just talked about, breaking news notifications, exclusive data and exclusive statistics that are intricate to fantasy specifically, so not just numbers and analytics, but we tie those into specifically how those players score fantasy points and how those analytics transition to fantasy production specifically. The app's got the podcast on it, coaching cards, and coaching tendencies, player comps, which are obviously fire at this time of the year when you're looking at all the rookies coming in and who they could compare to. Also, head over to patreon.com/BrodoFantasy for as little as $3 a month. You help keep the lights on and get access to the Discord, which has access to Casanova's DFS optimizer and the community of betting that we've got there. Doing NBA playoffs right now, obviously hockey playoffs, baseball. The boys have lots of baseball dugout content as well as the Petrop brothers like to do. You can find the Petropolises and the Brodo Army at Brodo Fantasy on Twitter and at brodofantasy.com. I'm at PsychWardFF, Matt Ward. Much love, much respect. Until next week.